Welcome back, everybody. Today we have a special recipe for cinnamon rolls. This is one of my favorite recipes for holidays and weekends or brunches. And this recipe is a little bit longer than usual because you're making 3 different stages. You're making the dough, you're making the filling, and you're making the icing. And then you're baking those. All in all, it takes about 4 hours. Just FYI as a heads up. You do get some breaks in between because you have to wait for the dough to rise, but it will take you about 4 hours end to end. So I'm not going to read out the ingredients. The ingredients are listed in the recipe. All right, let's get started with making the dough. For this dough, you're going to add warm water to the yeast and wait for that to proof. I use a whisk. And I'm using my stand mixer for this. It's going to be very helpful if you have one of those. You can make this with your hands. Add a little sugar. That's going to help activate the yeast. 1 teaspoon of that sugar, and then the rest we'll add later. And then you're going to scald the milk. What is scalding the milk? Scalding the milk is heating the milk on medium heat until you start seeing steam and bubbles around the edges. That means that it's scalded. I'm using the whisk so that it won't burn. And after it has gotten warm enough and you see the steam coming up like in this video, add the Crisco. I use the Crisco baking sticks. Let it melt and then cool down a little bit. At that point, you'll see that the yeast mixture has foamed up. You can add the salt and then the rest of the sugar to the yeast mixture and start whisking that. The milk is cooled down, so you're going to add the milk and the Crisco mixture and then whisk it again. And then you're going to take that beaten egg and add that to the mixture. That's why it's important for it to cool off. You don't want to cook the egg. Whisk this. And then attach the dough hook to your mixer and add about half of the flour. Start mixing that with the dough hook on medium speed. Mix it just enough to get it wet and then scrape down the bowl again and mix again. Now add the rest of your flour and mix this on medium. You're going to see a dough ball start to form. The edges of the bowl are going to start to come clean after that dough ball forms, and then you can knead that for an additional 2 or 3 minutes. The next step is to let that dough rise. So we're going to put that dough ball into a greased bowl and put that bowl covered into a warm space. Sometimes I heat up my oven and I turn it off, let it get a little bit warm. And I put that covered bowl in there and let the dough rise. We're going to let this rise for about 1.5 hours. Here's the part where you can take a break. After 1.5 hours in a warm place, the dough ball should have risen, and you're going to want to flour a work surface and punch down the dough, put it out onto the work surface, and knead it for a few more minutes. At that point, you're going to roll this into a rectangle, and that's going to be the cinnamon roll that gets rolled up. So I'm shaping it into a rectangle, and then I'm going to roll it into a 16-inch wide and 12-inch long or 12-inch deep rectangle. It doesn't have to be perfect here. You're going to roll this up, but if you're really good at rolling out dough, it should be exactly a rectangle. I rolled this one out a little bit larger than 16 by 12, but it's okay. It doesn't have to be perfect. The next step is to brush this with the melted butter. If you prepared your butter earlier and it got solid again, put it in the microwave, melt it again. I pour it out sometimes and just use the brush to brush it across the surface. After that, you're going to sprinkle it with the brown sugar and rub it into dough. It looks a lot like sand. You can rub it right into the dough No problem. To me, this is one of the best part of making this. I like adding the brown sugar, and then I sprinkle it with cinnamon. I didn't have exact measurements for the cinnamon in this recipe because it's up to you. If you like a lot of cinnamon, I use the ground cinnamon. I just sprinkle it on. I don't measure it out. And then optionally, you can add chopped pecans or walnuts or raisins even if you like that as a filling to these cinnamon rolls. Add that liberally. And our next step is we're gonna roll this up into a roll. This is the fun part. You wanna bring the kids in on this. Kids like to do this kind of thing. Roll it up uniformly and you're gonna make it into a log. Tap the edges. And next, you're gonna measure this out. If you're following my measurements, I get 12 pieces out of this, but I also use a ruler just to measure, and I use the dough scraper to mark and then cut those. At this point, you can save some of these in the freezer if you want. I just put them in a Ziploc, or if you're baking 12 rolls, you can put all of these into a 9x13 Pyrex dish. But these do really well frozen. So if you wanted to save 6 of them, put them in the freezer, you could pull them out later and they would rise up, and then you can bake those off later. It's great if you need to prepare it ahead of time. So I'm putting those into a greased 9x13 pan, and you remember they're going to expand a little bit, so you can arrange them after you've got them in the pan. If you have any filling that spilled out, you can put that on top. Next step is to bake the rolls. I've got 12 rolls here. First, you want to cover and wrap them. Again, they're going to go through a second rise in a warm area, approximately 45 minutes. And you see after I pull them out, they've risen up almost to the edge of the pan. Bake those for 350 degrees and for 15 to 20 minutes. And while those are baking, you can make the icing. The recipe for the icing is here. Optionally, if you have dulce de leche, you can add a few spoons of that into this icing. It's using cream cheese. This has got all the good stuff in it. Cream cheese, butter, confectioner sugar, vanilla, and optionally dulce de leche. So put all of those ingredients. You're going to do this by hand. Start mixing up with the spoon. You have to have room temperature ingredients for this. And now you're going to add, if you haven't, dulce de leche. That's optional though. You're also going to add your milk. Don't add too much milk though. I think the recipe calls for 2 tablespoons. That's all you need. Start mixing that so you don't see the sugar anymore and get the lumps out. Switch to the whisk. This is what it should look like. Nice and thick, not that many lumps, and ready to spread on the rolls after they come out of the oven. I let them cool for about 15 minutes. But then I pour it over with a spatula. Liberally, you want to cover it completely. Make sure you're doing this while the rolls are still warm. That's the whole concept. You're going to melt the icing. It's going to get into all the cracks and crevices. Ooey and gooey. It's going to be really good. I also, as a finishing touch, add more chopped pecans on top. So now these are ready to serve, and they are best warm or even hot. They can be reheated the next day if you put them in a Tupperware container. You can reheat those in the microwave for about 20-30 seconds, but they really are the best the first day. So I hope you all enjoy this recipe. Please subscribe to Cook Bake Learn. Have a great day. Hope you enjoy this.